spot on this computer. Okay, it tells us that we're recording, Adrian. It's amazing. Yep. So I just would like to thank you, Adrian, for coming today, and start by acknowledging that I'm recording this meeting from the lands of the Palawa people, and I honour their history and deep connection to this land and its waters, which were never ceded, and I pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. Adrian, it's such a pleasure to have you here. We've had a little bit of technical issues getting you onto the Zoom meeting, so just bear with me while I bring up your fabulous bio all about you. I want to make sure I get this right, because I was just so fascinated by what you've done, and we're going to be talking about it tonight. So Adrian Iodice has a deep passion for natural sustainable bee care. He started beekeeping with standard conventional Langstroth hives, and since 2010 he began experimenting with and studying various hive designs. Adrian is one of the pioneers of the natural beekeeping movement in Australia. In 2012, he studied biodynamic beekeeping at Mellifera Centre for Organic Beekeeping in Rosenfeld, southern Germany. He has come to the conclusion that the Kenyan top bar hive is the better hive suited to his needs, and he feels that every backyard beekeeper should truly consider the hive design they will eventually use for the well-being of their bees. He teaches natural, ethical beekeeping in Kenyan top bar hives. I'm just going to admit a few more people. In Kenyan top bar hives. Where am I up to? It's what happens when you lose your spot. In Melbourne, New South Wales, Canberra, Brisbane and the Northern Territory. He has recently featured on 4 episodes of the popular TV show River Cottage Australia, and has made the front cover of Earth Garden magazine and written an article for Pip magazine. Adrian is extremely passionate about natural, sustainable, biodynamic beekeeping, and is currently co-creating a bee sanctuary on a small community in the Bega Valley of southern New South Wales, where he lives with his wife, 3 kids and great friends. He uses 5 different styles of hive and will continue monitoring their outcomes. Adrian Iodice, welcome to Live Bees, and thank you for coming to have a chat with us about natural beekeeping. I'm going to start, Adrian, by asking you, how did you start beekeeping?
Good question. Well, we were living in Melbourne at the time, my wife and a couple of kids, and we were living on a half-acre block, sort of out of Melbourne, a suburb called Warrandyte. And we had a beautiful veggie garden. We had some chooks, some fruit trees, and I thought the next best thing would be to get bees, because I heard that getting bees in and close to your orchard really increases the yield of fruit. So I got a hive, and I got a conventional Langstroth hive, and pretty much got started from there. Mm.
And can you tell us then, so your journey from a conventional Langstroth hive to natural beekeeping, can you tell us then what natural beekeeping is?
Yeah. So well, the term natural comes from the fact that we allow bees to build natural comb from a top bar, for instance, or from or in a frame. So we don't use foundation wax. That's where natural comes from. But that can also be, extended into the way we manage our hives, or tend to keep our hives, or tend to our hives, allowing the bees to live close to the natural environment as they would in a tree hollow, for instance, as much as possible, and at the same time still managing the hive in a sense. So the term natural comes from that. Yeah. So there is a big difference between natural beekeeping and conventional commercial style beekeeping. But there's also a lot of in between. So some people might choose to, really go the natural way and keep bees in a log hive hung up in a tree, and never disturb them, and never manage them, in a sense. And then there's people who use the Langstroth hive and tend to manage that in a way that's not so commercial, in a sense. So there's all the variance in between, and it really depends on the keepers or the carers' capabilities or training or preference as to how deep they go into that natural realm.
So I know that sometimes probably all the beekeepers here would be natural beekeepers at times when we go out to our hives and put a frame into it and go, oops, there's no starter strip on that, there's no foundation, and we just let it go. But what is it specifically? I imagine it's a little bit of what you said, that you want to care for the bees. Is that what attracted you to the idea of natural beekeeping, or was it something else?
Well, I was growing organic garden. When I got my first hive, it was a conventional Langstroth hive, and the first book I read was Beekeeping for Dummies, and I then read a book by Eric Berovitz called, I can't remember now, The Hive, I think it was called. It's a biodynamic book, and it's Australian author. And he uses the Wari hive method, and I was really interested and intrigued by his what he wrote in the book, and also learning from other conventional beekeepers about the ways we tend our bees. It really didn't relate to the way I was living. Killing the queen was a big question mark. We're told to kill our queens every year or every 2 years and replace them, and blah blah blah, and all that sort of stuff. That didn't gel with me. It really didn't, especially when the answer came back was, oh, that's because they're more productive. You get more honey out of a queen that lays more eggs. And I didn't see that happening in my hive. My queen was fine. She was laying lots of eggs, even 3 years into conventional beekeeping. The whole idea of putting a queen excluder in a hive didn't gel with me. Not allowing the queen and the organism in itself to move freely right throughout the hive. Um, there's so many things in conventional beekeeping that didn't gel with me. So I started looking for an alternative, and that alternative is natural beekeeping.
Mm.
At the time, there wasn't many there wasn't much information here in Australia on natural beekeeping. Tim Malfoy was teaching through milkwood permaculture at the time, and he was the only guy or the only person I knew in Australia that was teaching natural beekeeping.
Mm.
So I tried to get onto his course a number of times, but they were always booked out, or I was not available at those specific dates. Uh, I was lucky enough to come across the natural beekeeping group in Melbourne, which pretty much just got started not long before I started looking for an alternative method. So I was able to join that club, and with some of the early members, learnt a lot from them, and we taught each other a lot of things. So we shared a lot of information, and I went deeper and deeper and deeper into it, and then eventually went to Germany and studied over there a little bit at Mellifera, and realised that I needed to bring that information that I learnt at the they're a biodynamic institute, so I wanted to bring that information back to Australia and really teach it here, and really you know lay the foundations for the biodynamic movement here in Australia.
Can we
Um,
talk about that, Adrian, a little bit about your time in southern Germany then, about
yeah.
what it was that attracted you to there and what you learnt there that you were able to bring back to Australia? Because I'd also like to go back a bit later and talk about, you mentioned the bee hive being an organism, and I'm very intrigued to have a chat about that a bit later. But let's start with the trip to southern Germany.
Yeah, so my wife's German, and I'd been attending a biodynamic course in Victoria, and one of the teachers, his name is Tobias Mager. He's a good friend of mine. We are good friends now, but at the time he was one of the lecturers there. It was a long course. It went over 12 months, and Tobias was a beekeeper, and he brought some of his teachings into the classroom and on bees, which intrigued me because his approach was completely different to what I'd been taught and what I'd learnt myself prior to that.
Mm.
And I was already on that path of looking for an alternative, and I was meeting Tobias and asking him some questions about biodynamic beekeeping. He then eventually pointed me to Germany and said, "Look, if you really want to learn this stuff, this is the place to go to." Excuse me a second. And gave me the information, and it just happened to be that my wife and I and the kids were planning a trip back to Berlin to visit her family. And I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to go to southern Germany and enroll myself into a few classes there, which I did, and that was great. And I learnt a lot there, even though it was all in German at the time.
So how did you do that?
Well, interesting. My wife speaks German at home with the children, so I can understand a fair bit of German. Believe it or not, it's just over the years of listening to it every day. And the kids speak German with each other at home. So I could get a fair bit of it, and because I'd already been beekeeping, it wasn't something that I was completely unfamiliar with. Also, if I really wanted to know something and I didn't understand the gist of what he was talking about, the teacher, I would ask him, and he spoke fluent English.
Yeah.
There was also a couple of the students as well were willing to translate for me. So I would sit between two English speakers, German English speakers, and between them they were able to give me information as I needed it. It was great. It really worked out well, and it's such a beautiful place. We stayed there on site, and all day, every day was bees, and more bees. And I had 150 hives on site on the property in different apiary sites, and we would walk between them all and catch swarms. It was right during the swarming season, and there were swarms everywhere. It was
Oh,
incredible.
wow.
It was
Yeah.
an incredible time. It was just
Yeah.
picturesque, really. Never forget those times there. Yeah.
And is that where you picked up, that we'll go back to that concept of a beehive being a living organism? That's very interesting to me. A lot of people will talk about bees in a caste system, like you have a queen, a drone, a worker, and all of that is true. But, I remember talking to Simon Mulvaney a few years ago, and I said to him, I get worried if I squash a bee, every now and then. He said, "Don't worry, Jenny, it's like a capillary in a brain." And then when he started talking to me in that concept, I thought that's an interesting way of being able to manage bees in a way that you're not stressing every time you open the hive. So can you tell me about your idea of the organism?
Okay, yes. So I believe I see it as an organism, and each bee is a cell of that organism, and that cell is able to leave the organism, leave its home, and forage and get what it needs from the outer environment and bring it back home into the inner environment. Um, the first thing I talk about when I teach, and I say this to all my students, is if anything you get here over the next 2 days, this is the most important thing I'm about to tell you, and that the bees are an organism. That colony of bees is an organism, and you really need to get that into your soul. It's not just into your brain. Get it into your soul. Feel it, because if we treat that colony as an organism instead of individual bees, we will react completely different. It's like playing with a cat, for instance. You know, we don't just play with individual hairs of that cat. We play with the cat, and we get an attachment to that cat. And if beekeepers can understand that and feel that organism and get a connection to that organism, then we'll treat the whole as one, including the beehive. So the box that they're in, that's part of the organism. It's the outer shell of the organism. It's a really important part, and a lot of people don't understand that, or don't get that, or haven't even considered that. So you've got the outer shell, and then you've got the inner membrane. The first line of defense is the propolis, and then you've got the nest scent inside of that, the duft. That's really important. I learned that in Germany. It's one of the things that we don't consider at all, or most beekeepers don't consider at all, that nest scent, stopping pathogens coming in. And then you've got the bees themselves with their venom and the stingers, and the guard bees inside the hive, not just at the entrance, but the soldier bees inside the hive, the ones that are running around looking for fast-moving insects, usually robber bees or other insects that are preying on bees, or wasps. You've got these soldier bees inside there. And then you've got the organism itself. So we really need to understand that, and I think that's one of the most important fundamental things about bees is understanding that they're an organism. And
Probably
each time we open that box, we're breaking the chest open. We're cutting open the chest of the organism. Think of it that if we bring it back to that,
yeah.
and then that brings us back into ourselves, and what damage we're creating inside that organism by opening that box each time, and our attitude when we go into that box, and how we connect with the heart and all the bits and pieces inside that box. How are we connecting? What energy are we bringing in there? What pathogens are we letting in there? And what are we getting out of it? I think it's really important that we consider all the above that I just mentioned every time we go into a beehive.
That's fascinating. That's really fascinating, Adrian. And I suppose it's a lovely segue, that concept, into your area of expertise, which is Kenyan top bar hives. So is that part of the reason you love them, is because they do create this whole organism, and for you to work them as a beekeeper, you are much more conscious and aware when you're working in that Kenyan top bar space? What is it about the Kenyan top bar that you love?
Yeah, so pretty much what you're mentioning. I love the fact that it's a one-room hive. That, I think, is really, really super important for me, and I can see that it's important for the bees too. That it's one room. The bees can move freely right through it. I'm not I'm not lifting a box off, or I'm not splitting the brood boxes. Let's say you're managing a Langstroth with two bottom brood boxes and one super, for instance. To get into that brood, I'm not having to separate the brood area and destroy that nest scent, for instance, and the propolis around it and everything that holds together. Every time I go into a Kenyan hive, for instance, I'm moving the follower board across, and I'm literally working with those bees that are right there, just on those two frames, on those two combs, right? That's it. They're the only bees that I have access to, and they have access to me. And as I go deeper into the hive, I'm moving those combs across and pushing them against the follower board, and then the next one I'm pushing against the next comb. So again, I'm still only dealing with the part of the hive that's opened. Compare that to a Langstroth hive where you're taking the roof off, losing all your nest scent, losing all your heat, which takes them about 24 hours to recover, by the way. Then every bee in that colony knows that they've breached, they've been broken into. Alarm pheromones are going everywhere. We need to use a fair bit of smoke in there. Bees are, some bees, some colonies allow that and deal with that quite easily. But majority of the time they get quite stressed out. So the Kenyan hive for me, after using Langstroths and Wari hives and golden hives, using the Kenyan was a big opening, really, a big insight into how gentle and how easy it can be without all the smoke, without all the stress on the bee colony and on myself, of course, because if they're stressed, I'm stressed. And the simplicity of going into a hive and really enjoying the meditation of what I'm getting out of that hive, enjoying what I'm learning from those bees at each time I go into a hive, rather than feeling stressed about all these bees attacking me, getting stung, and losing their stingers and dying around me. I don't get that anymore. I hardly ever have a situation like that. Whereas I know I do get a lot of that with Langstroths. I still work some Langstroths, and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how gentle and how my energy is approaching some of those hives. I still know I'm stressing the bees out and I'm squashing bees and
Yeah. Adrian, you were mentioning that you were talking about follower boards. Could you explain to some of the people listening here what a follower board is?
yes. Okay. So a Kenyan hive is a one room hive. So it's a horizontal hive. It has two. Well, the model I use, which is it's a hybridization between Les Crowder's model and Phil Chandler's model, where we use two false walls. So the entrance is in the middle of the hive, and we use two false walls on either side of the entrance, with a bunch of top bars between those two false walls. The false walls are the follower boards. Now we start off let's say as a swarm with about 10 top bars between the two follower boards. And once the bees build on all those 10 top bars, I then move the follower board across. So the right one I move to the right, the left one I move to the left, one or two bars width, and then I place two empty bars, one on each side or two on each side. It depends how quick they're building up in that period. And then I move the follower boards back in nice and tight, so the bees aren't needing to fill an 8-framed hive empty box above the brood area, which of course all the heat's going to go up there, and they're going to have to work really hard to rebuild the heat. So we're adding top bars, one or two at a time, maybe sometimes three or four, and then we're enclosing that brood area back into a nice little package, so the bees are only maintaining enough heat, or only producing enough heat to maintain that area that I've enclosed them in. So that really appealed to me when I first learnt about and read the books about the top bar hives. That part mostly appealed to me, using the follower boards to do that. So that's what we do with the follower boards. Yeah.
What other advantages can you see in using a Kenyan top bar hive that might be restrictions? You've mentioned losing propolis, you've mentioned having to deconstruct a Langstroth hive, you've mentioned being able to keep the brood warm for in the Kenyan top bar. What other advantages are there as a beekeeper, or for the
Yeah,
bees?
for the bees mostly.
Yeah.
Well, I one thing, it's on legs. That's a big advantage, honestly.
Really bending.
But yeah, like my back's not the best at the best of times,
Yeah.
and uh, lifting 20-30 kilo boxes doesn't appeal to me at all anymore. And being in a Kenyan, they're up high. I'm actually standing behind the hive. I'm working it really easily. If I want to harvest one bar out, I harvest one bar out, literally. And that's how I do it these days. I take 2 or 3 bars out of a hive,
Mm.
I crush it up, I take it home, crush it up, and when I run out, I go back and get some more.
Mm.
I don't sell honey. It's not what I do, so I don't need to produce a lot of honey in that sense. I'm not paying my mortgage with honey.
Mm.
Um, so that really appeals to me. The fact that I can, you can do that in a Langstroth hive. You can take one frame out at a time and put it through your
Mm.
centrifugal extractor, or cut it out and crush it. Same. Um, but it just seems that it doesn't work that way, even though I've still got Langstroth hives. Well, actually, I only got one now. Um, I still don't, take one or two out. I wait till the box is full and then I take the box. It's an odd thing. I'm
Mm.
aware of that, yet I still have old habits, I suppose,
Yeah.
or it's just more convenient to take the box,
Mm.
uh, shake all the bees off, brush them
Mm.
off and take the box. Whereas a Kenyan hive, I guess because I've got to cut each comb off the top bar into an esky at my feet, or into a container at my feet with a lid on it, I'm more aware of what I'm taking. So I'll only take one or two, because
Mm.
it's just, for me, it's a lot easier.
Mm.
Um, Other advantages is I guess, well, it depends on the timber you use, but you can buy conventional hives. You're only about 22 mil thick, between 21, 22 mil thick, which is fairly light in my investigations and what I've learnt in recent years. I've always used 30 mil 30 mil timber as
Mm.
a minimum for building hives. Um, so that in itself increases the density of timber for insulation purposes.
Mm.
Um, and I know that, there's a lot of information that's come out over the last 5 years around thermal imaging on hives, on conventional Langstroth hives versus thicker bodied hives. And it's, there's video footage of how much heat is lost out of a conventional hive. So again, to make my own hives at the thickness I like to make them, which is 30 mil, works a lot better in that sense. Also, I really enjoy making things. I enjoy woodwork, so I
Yeah.
enjoy building my own hives. I couldn't imagine building a Langstroth hive and then building all the frames for it. It just doesn't appeal to me. It's an oblong box. The Kenyan appeals to me. It looks great in the garden. Um, it the roof on it is a beautiful gabled roof with big eaves. So again, very shady. I can stick my hive right in the middle of a paddock in the middle of summer, and the body of the hive hardly ever gets hit by the sun. Only when it's about 3 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and just a small slither on the bottom there gets hit. So it's shaded all year round. In winter, if it's facing east, if the hive's facing east, in winter it gets the low sun hitting its northern side, where it's meant to be, and it warms up that northern side. Um, what else? There's so many.
You're selling it. You're selling it. There's no doubt about that. I know that I'm based in Tasmania, and down
Yeah,
here, we do have people that keep Kenyan top bars, but we also hear people saying, usually commercial beekeepers, saying, "Oh, Kenyan top bar's no good here. It's too cold." What do you say in answer to that?
absolute bollocks.
I thought you were going to say that. Yeah.
I've heard that so many times from
Yeah.
Tasmanians. I
Yeah.
get emails all the time from people in
Yeah.
Tasmania asking
Yeah.
me what my opinion about that is. Now, when we've got to look at so the Kenyan originated in Canada, but it was designed in Canada to be taken over to Kenya to hot climates, and they're right, it is suited to a hot climate. Um, the thing is, though, Phil Chandler took it apart and rebuilt it for England. So it handles the bloody cold in England. It's surely going to handle the cold down here in Australia. We don't get winter. I know it's cold in Tassie, but it's still not winter. You go
It's not
go
the
and hang
same.
out in go and hang out in Berlin for a winter, and you'll know about cold. My
Yes.
brother-in-law has hives in Berlin, Kenyan
Yeah.
hives. I helped
Yeah.
him build them when I was there once, um, and we built them at 45 mil thick because that's the lumber that he could get. Um, and they do fine. I mean, apart from the Varroa, that is, but
Yeah.
but they do fine in that cold weather. They're fine. You know, they work. They work well.
Well, now that you've sold it so effectively to all of us here, I'm wondering, how do we get plans if we did want to build it? Because some of us do have sheds and we do like to also do woodwork.
Yeah.
Where's the best place for us to pick up some plans?
Well, I could send you my plans, not a problem at all. I'm happy
Mm,
to email them directly to you, and you can hand them out. Um,
fabulous.
and I sell the macrocarpa timber, but there is someone in Tassie selling that timber. Um, I've heard. So well
What?
worth getting it locally if you're going to get some.
Yeah.
I think
Because
the
I was
person,
wondering, 30 mils pretty thick. Like most of the
yeah,
timber we get here's 19. We can't even get 22. So
don't go for
unless you
9.
mill it yourself, yeah,
Yeah. No, there's
yeah.
definitely someone down that way selling the macrocarpa, and I think
Okay.
they sell the worry hives as well. Have you heard of the worry hive?
Is it Ronnie?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I really don't.
Yeah, okay.
I follow someone on, I think it's Natural Beekeeping Tasmania. I think
Mania, it's Ronnie. Yeah,
that's
yep.
that,
Yeah,
that's
good.
that's you. No, no,
No, that's not me.
you're
That's
Jen.
Ronnie. That's Ronnie Voigt. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I see that they make worry hives and they sell them a
Yes,
lot.
she
So yeah.
does. Yeah.
So she would make she would have the timber available probably.
Yeah.
I think she makes them out of macrocarpa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So ask her then. Thank
Find
you.
out, yeah, or find out who the miller is, you know, and
Yeah.
approach them yourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Um, so what work are you currently doing, Adrian, to share the joy of the Kenyan top bar? Are you running courses? What are you doing?
Well, to be honest with you, at the moment, I am building an extension on our house for our other kids, for our kids, because we live in a 2-bedroom little cottage. So
Yeah.
3 kids in one room's not working anymore. Um, so it's time we built the extension. So I'm really been flat out doing that for the last
Yeah.
10 months.
Wow.
Um, I I have taught 2 courses within that time in Victoria, actually in Castlemaine.
Mm.
I'm planning a course at the moment. We're just about to launch it online in Ballingen, New South Wales, northern
Yeah.
New South Wales,
Yeah.
um, with a woman called Emily
Oh,
Minsky.
Mishki. Yep. I know
Minsky?
Emily. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Embody bee.
yeah. So we'll be
Yeah, terrific.
collaborating, teaching that course together.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah, Emily did my course many, many years ago when she first got started, and in Canberra actually. And we've kept in touch over the years. And I just love what she's doing. I think she's really taken it to that next level, where I'm really interested in all of that, but I just haven't had the time to indulge and really go deep into that space that she's managed to go to. And
Yeah.
I really take my hat off, and I'd love to learn more from her, and also collaborating together. It just feels really right. And
Great.
so yeah, we're doing that in May, June, July, August. In August next year, this year in August,
Yeah.
yeah, in the end
Yeah,
of August.
great. Great.
I was supposed to do a number of talks recently, which I never managed to get to. I
Well,
hurt
we're
my
lucky
back.
to have you then.
Yeah, no, but I hurt my back. I was supposed to drive 7 hours
Oh
and go and
no.
do a talk at the Off-Grid Living Festival in Victoria, but I never
Yeah.
got there. But anyway, yeah, so not much
Next
really.
year.
I haven't been doing a lot.
Mm.
Um, but we about a year and a half ago we got back from a trip around Australia. So we decided to head off with a caravan and travel around Australia for 10 months, and done a bunch of courses around Australia. So
Great.
think I'm sort of having a bit of a break from that.
Oh yeah, you got to do that definitely. Adrian, if people wanted to get in touch with you, maybe inquire about the Bellingen course or just to reach out to you, what's the best way that they can contact you?
Yeah, email's good.
Yeah.
Adrian@beekeepingnaturally.com.au.
I'll
That's
share
easy.
that when I put this interview up. But before we wind up, and I will be inviting our guests that are here tonight to ask some questions of you, because this is a very special thing to be able to have you here. These are 5 questions I ask all of our guests. What's your best advice for happy bees? I think I know the answer to that question, but I'll let you answer it.
For happy bees, leaving them alone. I don't know if
You were
that
going
was
to say
what you were
that.
expecting.
Yes.
But realistically, I mean, we all love going into hives. Just dropping in before you go into the hive and really respecting what they want. So, for instance, a quick one, if I can. Some people will push through and push through and push through and force themselves in, smoke, smoke, smoke. But for me, as soon as I open a hive, and I've learned to understand the way they move, and you'll see one bee will jump at you, or jump out and jump on your hand, and maybe not sting, but that's one of those soldier bees I was talking about, looking for fast moving objects. Um, if you just let her calm down and go back into the hive, and let them all calm down and just keep still, keep completely still, and then they'll start to go about their business again. Then go the next step. And if they continue being agitated, walk away, put it away, close it up, and move and leave it. Come back another day. That's the truth of it. Come back another day
Yeah.
if you can.
Good advice.
Mm.
Best advice for new beekeepers?
Stay away from Langstroth hives. That's my truth. I can't stand them. They are horrible hives. Sorry, but that's my truth. I've had them. I've used them for years and years and years, and I just don't like them. I don't like using them. I avoid. Actually, I've got one, and I avoid even opening it anymore. I don't even. I leave them alone. They're sitting in the paddock, and it's going to rot one day, and I'm just going to let them do their thing, because I don't like to disturb them. Every time I open a Langstroth hive, I kill bees. It doesn't matter how careful I am. I know Simon said to you that, yes, I'm killing a cell, but every time you kill a bee, that organism knows,
Yeah.
and it starts learning, and it starts getting a memory, and it starts saying, this person's a bastard. And sorry about the language, but I don't want to deal with that person anymore. Get away from me. And I don't want, and personally, I don't want them to feel that way about me. I want them to enjoy as me as much as I enjoy their company. So
Like a symbiotic relationship.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Adrian, the best bee-friendly plant?
That's an easy one. Borage.
Yeah, well, yes, it's always
There's so
flowering and there's always
many.
bees on it.
No, there's so many. I don't think there's such a thing, to be honest with you. Borage is a good one because there's been some research done, maybe 7, 8 years ago, about borage eliminating toxicity. So if there's spraying around your property or around your farm or in the area, bees will bring that back, of course, when they collect nectar and pollen. And borage actually helps get rid of that, apparently. So that's probably a really good plant to plant around if you're living in an area that's got high pollutants in it.
Good to know, especially if you're living in an urban area or rural where
Definitely.
they spray everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, your favorite honey?
Oh man. Well, I must say it used to be blue box, which we have on our property. Some call it grey box.
Yeah.
Um, and it only flowers every 4 or 5 years. And when it's in flower, it's a very light coloured honey, and it's so delicious. It's got an amazing aroma and it tastes superb. But having said that, last year, and I don't know why I haven't tasted it like that before, but not last year, during last winter, the spotted gum was flowering in Bermagui,
Oh,
and and I had some hives at my mate's place down there, and we got tons of honey off them. If I wanted it, I could have, but I did get a fair bit of honey. And the honey's been delectable. It's a caramel flavored honey.
Yeah.
It's absolutely gorgeous. I've
Yeah.
never had it that way, so I'm wondering if it was a mixture of the spotted gum and something else that they may have been collecting in the area. But geez, it's gorgeous. I've got half a jar left at home, and I'm dreading putting it in my tea because
Precious. Yeah.
yeah, it just tastes so good on its own. But I don't
Don't
like.
waste it in your tea.
No, I know, but I don't have any other honey, so,
Oh, damn it. Yeah.
well, that's
Oh,
life.
Adrian. Last question for you before I open the floor. Your favorite beekeeping hack?
Hmm. What do you mean by that exactly?
Like if you're out somewhere and you have to be a bushman because you've literally look in the back of your truck and you think, I've got this bit of string and a bit of duct tape and this is what I'm going to do with it.
Right, okay. So
You've never been caught like that, obviously. It's only something that I do.
no, I've been caught like that.
Have you?
You mean with beekeeping? Oh, wow.
Anything,
Oh,
anything.
shit. Excuse me.
That's all right. I
Sorry.
think we've heard the words before. It's
Yeah, good.
fine.
Um, beekeeping hack. Oh, many times I've turned up to an apiary without any bee suits, or down in Bermagui or at a mate's place, thinking, "Oh, yeah, I'll be right,"
Oh,
and the bees quickly tell me I'm not. So
yeah.
that's happened many a times, and I guess making do with what you got. Run up to the house, find a bit of netting or something, and throw it over your head, and get some dishwashing gloves on, and tuck your shirt in and tuck everything in, and get back down there to close the hive up.
I can
Like
imagine you like that, yeah.
throw a whole heap of cardboard in a steel bucket or something, and use that as the
Yeah.
smoker.
Yeah, yeah.
I've done that a few times, believe me. So
Well,
yeah,
they're good examples of hacks.
yeah, exactly.
Adrian, thank you. That's
You're
yeah, thank
welcome.
you for your time today. It's been lovely speaking with you and listening to about the Kenyan top bar hive. I would like
Yeah,
to give an opportunity for people who are listening with us to
yeah,
ask some questions. You can either take yourself off mute or ask questions directly in the chat box, and I can ask the question for you. But yeah, please feel free to ask questions of Adrian. I'll give people a minute to think about it. I can see people. Kristen's coming off mute. Kristen.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, Adrian. That was a fascinating talk. It's really interesting because when I first got these, the first lengths, and I've only got lengths, unfortunately, but the guy that I got my hive off actually was building a Kenyan top bar. So I sort of heard all about it. But yeah, like Jen, it was like this whole thing about, oh, you can't use these in Tassie, it's way too cold.
yeah,
I've never investigated it further, which is why I really wanted to come on today, because I just think I love the idea of it being so much better for the bees, because I'm still struggling sort of 3 years in, opening up my hives, and like you said, you can tell when the bees are not happy that you're there. So yeah, I'm quite interested, but I'm just wondering, I know this is the answer to this will be, how long is a piece of string, but how often do you go into your hive? I mean, I know you're not doing it for the honey, so you're not
yeah.
harvesting honey.
No, that's a good
But
question.
how
I
often
get
do you
asked
go
that all the
in and
time.
check? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Kenyan hive, just when you're getting started with the Kenyan hive, it's quite a lot actually. It's more so than any Langstroth hive, because with the Langstroth you pretty much stick a colony in there. You've got foundation, the bees get started and they go straight. With a Kenyan, you've got all the issues of the potential of the colony deciding to go crossways, so they might cross comb, which happens quite often in a Kenyan hive. They're the down. That's the real downside of a Kenyan is cross combing. So to start off with, when I put a swarm, let's say I introduce a swarm today, I'll definitely in 3 days I'll go into that hive again, and to make sure that the bees are building straight comb, by checking the amount of comb they've built, making sure that they're in the center of each top bar, and they're actually running parallel with the top bar, with the center of the top bar. Judging by how much they've built in those 3 days, I then can judge when my next visit will be. So, for instance, if they've only built, 2 or 3 little tiny combs to start with, which most of the times they do, then I know I've got a couple of weeks before I need to go back into that hive. But if sometimes it's happened where occasionally they've built 3 or 4 quite large combs in 3 days, well, then I know in 3 more days they're going to build the same amount. So I've got to be quick and vigilant and get in there and get out as quick as I can. So, yeah, again, it depends on how much nectar they're bringing in, of course, because that will then determine how much they build and how quick they build up. So it really depends on what's flowering in the area, how much nectar's coming in, how strong that colony is, and how quick they're building. And that's all determined really by the first inspection, second inspection. And each inspection I'll then determine on the amount they've built in that period, I'll determine when I need to go back into that hive. So the first month is crucial. I think I'll do probably 4 inspections, 5 inspections in that first month. So once a week, let's just call it that. Yeah.
Yeah.
After that, things start to slow down, possibly, and then maybe once a fortnight. When there's a honey flow on, let's say it's an established colony and there's a honey flow on, then I'm going in again once a week, twice a week sometimes. But when I say I'm going into the hive, I'm literally moving the follower board, adding a top bar or 2 or 3, and closing it up again. It's a 2-minute job at most. I'm hardly ever using a smoker in those situations because the colony's young. They're too busy building up comb. They're not worried about me yet. There's not much brood in there to protect, so they're not so defensive. So I'm able to quickly get in, add a couple of bars, and get out. And it's really that simple and that beautiful. I'm in connection with that colony and the rate it's growing. It's not a box I've stuck bees in a box and I've left them there and forgot about them and come back 2 months later. So I feel a deep connection with that colony because I'm nursing it and allowing that colony to expand while I'm watching it at the same time. So I have a deep connection with it right from the beginning, and it's a beautiful connection. Actually, I really enjoy that part of the Kenyan hive too. Yeah, hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, thank you. I've got a heap more questions now, but I'll let somebody else have a go because otherwise I just take up all the time. Thank
Send
you.
me some emails.
Yeah,
I'm happy to answer emails, but I'll pass on my phone number as well. I'm really happy to. Honestly, I say this to everybody: call me and talk to me. I'm really accessible. So
thank you.
if I don't answer, leave a message and I will ring you back. I guarantee it. And I'll talk to you about it. It's easier for me to speak to someone over the phone than it is to answer a bloody email. It
Yeah,
takes hours to answer email.
absolutely.
I hate it. But I prefer to be able to speak and understand what your bees are doing and ask you a couple of questions and then able to answer from there. It's much easier.
Right. Thank
Not
you.
as messy. No worries. You're welcome.
I think, Adrian, you've probably inspired us to, I'm thinking, Kristen, maybe a bit of a workshop on having a go at building our own Kenyan hives.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That sounds great, Jen.
Yeah, let's cogitate on that and see what we can make happen. I think that'll be fun.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Are there any other questions while we're just finishing up our chat with Adrian? Feel free to tap in as Kristen did. And if there are no more questions, it looks like we're done.
Can I ask one more then?
Yes, Kristen, of course you can. Sorry, you did say you had more questions.
I'll just ask one more. So, Adrian, what do you do if you go in and there's cross comb everywhere?
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, that's a great question. I used to be really concerned about it and stressed about it because of the regulations around cross combing. I'm not concerned anymore. And what I tend to do and what I learned over the years is normally it depends on whether the bee if it's just started out and there's cross combing, you'll only I guess that's what I'm checking for. So let's say I've put a swarm in, 3 days later I've come in and the bees have built a little bit diagonally and not in the center. I'll literally cut that off and get them to start
Okay.
building again, or push it back on to the center and reform it in a sense in where I want them to, and then let them get started again. What I've started using recently, and I've always been avoiding it, I've been talking about it for years, but I've avoided using starter strips. If you look at my plans, when you get my plans, I suggest putting icy pole sticks in a groove in the center of each top bar by dipping the icy pole stick into molten wax and then sticking it into the wax then melts, dries into the groove, and the icy pole sticks becomes a wax covered guide for the bees to build their comb from. But sometimes I'll build straight, and then all of a sudden they'll veer off. There are a number of reasons they do that. I won't get into that because it's quite complicated. You can see I've got some YouTube clips on my YouTube channel on that there. So if you want some more information, go and have a look at that. Beekeeping Naturally, it's called, the YouTube channel. So what I've started doing recently is suggesting to people to use 5 centimeter starter strips in each top bar when they first get established, when they first catch a swarm. And that way there, you're not worried that the bees are going to cross comb at any particular time, because they will definitely build straight comb. It's later on that's the issue, because what happens if they're cross combing right in the beginning, then the whole thing's going to be a mess, including your brood area, which that's the important part. You need to be able to remove your brood combs for inspection, right? Not the honeycombs. That's got nothing to do with it. If you read the guide, whatever it is, the DPI regulations, it's the brood area that needs to be inspected. The brood combs need to be able to be removed. So that's really important. So get that straight. That needs to be done right. You need to make sure that the bees are building straight comb in the brood area. Later on, what happens is the bees will increase the depth of their cells when there's a honey flow on. So in the honey part of the hive, the end part of the hive, because the brood's always kept near the entrance, the honey's kept to the outer edges where the follower boards are, right? So what happens is when the bees have built nice straight comb at a certain thickness, at a point there'll be a honey flow on, for instance, and instead of them building new combs, because it's coming in so quick, they'll extend the depth of the cells, some of the cells on those existing combs, usually at the top, so just beneath the top bar, and usually at the front of the hive beneath the top bar at the front of the hive, at probably a 5 centimeter diameter piece of comb there. That gets extended out quite thick. And what happens if I add a top bar next to that, an empty top bar, and the bees start building comb, they'll build until they reach that wide part, and then they'll divert off center and they'll cross over onto the next comb. And if I'm not onto it, they'll continue doing that until it gets worse and worse and worse. Now, there are ways to manage that. Again, best to go into my website, to my YouTube channel. But what I do now is, if I come across 2 or 3 combs that are cross combed, usually it will only be 3 or 4 that are stuck together somewhat. I'll leave them as a package, and I'll write an arrow pointing this way and an arrow pointing that way on the 2 end ones. So I know between the 2 arrows, anywhere in between, they're all stuck together. And I'll slowly move that package across and add bars between the last straight comb and the first one that started going wonky. And I'll add in there. And what that does is push that package, those 4 combs that are cross combed, right to the ends. And then I'll harvest that out as one package. And that way I'm not going in there cutting out any comb, because I used to go in there and cut comb off and then reattach it with hair clips, you know, those big crocodile hair clips. Again, on my YouTube channel, you'll see some of that happening there as well.
That's a beekeeping hack, just for the record.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, that's a beekeeping hack. Yeah, right, gotcha. Well, I'll
You know, that's great, Adrian. Thank you. That's really
yeah, I'll
interesting.
harvest that out. I think
Yeah.
that's what I was getting to.
That's good. Thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? You might as well. I'm
No,
all
I'm
right.
good.
Cool.
I'm good.
Oh yeah, we've got one in the chat. We've got one in the chat
Oh,
here.
yeah.
It says, I am 12 months into my, it's from Di. Thanks, Di. I'm 12 months into my beekeeping and am lucky enough to have a beautiful top bar hive. I love everything, every aspect of it, especially when I compare it to the experiences of my friends with Langstroth and flow hives. My question is around small hive beetles.
Yep.
Is there anything we should be doing to help manage these in a TBH in the same way as the oil tray in the bottom of the Langstroths? I noticed the odd few, they are quick, but should I be doing anything? Anything extra? There you go. That's your
Okay.
question. Thanks, Di.
Good question, Di. It depends on where you live. If you're, let's say, Ballingen, Northern New South Wales and above, maybe the Northern Rivers, so Byron
She's in
Bay,
Canberra, just for the record.
no problem. Nothing, don't do a thing. Honestly, I've got hive beetle in every one of my hives down here. You're not too far from us, and it gets colder in Canberra and not as humid. So humidity really triggers the hive beetle into production mode. They love the humid conditions. Hence, they live in compost bins and in beehives. Your bees will manage the hive beetle, not a problem at all. If you notice that, you'll see them once you move your follower board, you'll know all the beetle will either run out or run in back into the hive, because the bees have chased them underneath your follower board. That's where they're hiding from the bees. They've probably even sealed the inside with some propolis to seal the beetle out and encage them in the propolis. So when you move your follower board, the beetle will run in, but the bees will keep them away from the brood area. So the beetle needs to lay its eggs around the brood area in the pollen, especially to feed its young as they're developing. And if the bees can manage them and keep them out of the brood area, then they won't take over the hive. They won't be able to really do anything in there. I've had hundreds of beetles in my hive over the years, and I've never ever lost one Kenyan to hive beetle infestation. Never. I know of hives that have, but they're usually around the Byron Bay area and north of there. So that really hot climate, humid, they get thousands of beetles in their hive, and the beetle then takes over, especially if the colony swarms, because the numbers reduce dramatically. The volume's still big. There's still lots of honey, lots of brood, lots of pollen, but the numbers have halved or you know, dropped down a third. So those bees won't be able to manage those beetle, and the beetle will then move in. Being in Canberra, you're going to get half a dozen beetles in your hive. You know, a dozen most. I wouldn't worry a thing about it. Don't worry. Don't even concern yourself about it. The bees know what they're doing. Honestly.
Thanks, Adrian. And Di just says, thanks. That is really helpful. I generally find them on the end bars around my follower board, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so you know, Di, I've never seen a beetle on any of my brood combs ever. So that's just tells you that the bees are chasing them out, keeping them at bay. So just touching on that, Langstroth hives have frames. Golden hives have frames. Warrior hives these days have frames. So the beetle has got hundreds of little nooks and crannies to hide in, and that's the issue. The bees can't get them. They can't chase them out of the little cracks and to the entrance or away from the brood area, because they can hide. They can hide everywhere. The worst thing is what I've noticed with Langstroth hives is, as soon as you take off that the plastic off the top, what's it called, the lino off the top. Have you noticed when you take it off, you look on top of your frames, and there's like a corral built out of propolis, and probably 3 or 4 beetle running out of it. Well, that's because the bees have corralled those beetle there, and they've built a wall around them to encage them. As soon as you've ripped that plastic off, the beetle then jump the fence of the corral and drop straight down into your brood area. They actually jump off the edge. They don't crawl down. They jump. You see them. They'll run over the edge like they're running over a cliff. And where do they go? They fall all the way down, straight down into your brood area. It's perfect for them. So another disadvantage of framed hives and Langstroth hive management techniques.
Thank you, Di, and thank you, Adrian. Any other questions before we finish up for tonight? I think that's everything. As Adrian has mentioned, you're welcome to call him or email him anytime. Adrian, it's been fabulous. I've learnt a lot tonight. So it's been fabulous listening to you talking about the Kenyan top bar hive. And I hope everybody else has enjoyed this discussion as much as I have. It will be shared on YouTube. I'll share the link with you, Adrian, as well, and encourage you to share this chat if you think someone might benefit from it. So thank you again. And yeah, thanks everyone. And I will finish the recording.